Derek Bieri built Vice Grip Garage from the ground up. Just like the rusted-out classics, he brings roaring back to life. With humor, grit, and a genuine heart, he turned forgotten barn finds into viral gold, earning a devoted following along the way. But there's a part of Derek's story that never made it into the videos. Behind the laughter and late-night wrenching is a personal tragedy that reshaped everything. This isn't about a busted engine or a project gone wrong. It's something far deeper. Because while Derek's channel is all about second chances, not everything in his life could be restored. If you've got a soft spot for old cars and the stories baked into their rust, then chances are you've heard of Derek Bieri. He's the man behind Vice Grip Garage, the YouTube channel where forgotten cars aren't just fixed, they're revived with heart and hustle. But before the wrench turns and engines roar, Derek's story starts way back on May 16th, 1984, in Minot, North Dakota. He didn't grow up with a lot of money, but what he did have was grit, work ethic, and a whole lot of hands-on learning. Raised by his grandparents on a cattle and wheat farm in northwest South Dakota, Derek was surrounded by the kind of people who never paid someone else to fix what they could figure out themselves. His grandfather was the kind of man who always had a pair of pliers on his hip, and Derek's father followed in those exact same footsteps. Living on a farm where stores were few and far between, the Bieri family didn't have the luxury of new parts or quick fixes. They kept things running by getting creative, pulling old trucks from fields, patching them up just enough to get through a few seasons, then repeating the process. That's where Derek's love for wrenching really took hold. It wasn't about restoring showpieces. It was about survival, ingenuity, and making things work with what was on hand. From a young age, he learned more in the barn and under hoods than he ever did in a classroom. By the time he hit high school, he and his best friend Chad were cruising back roads, scouting for beat-up cars they could revive. They'd get them running just well enough to either drive or flip for a few bucks. In many ways, they were doing early versions of what would later become viral content on YouTube. After high school, Derek found himself jumping between a variety of jobs, all rooted in the automotive and transportation world. While he hasn't shared every detail about those early gigs, it's clear he explored just about every angle, everything from getting his hands greasy with mechanical work to gaining a behind-the-scenes look at how the auto industry functions from a business perspective. These roles became a crash course in the real-world mechanics of both machines and management. Whether it was working on cars, trucks, or even heavy-duty machinery, Derek wasn't just learning about engines, he was soaking up knowledge about customer service, logistics, and the day-to-day grind of running operations. That hands-on experience gave him a unique blend of blue-collar skill and white-collar know-how. Eventually, Derek leveled up into corporate life, even landing a few C-suite positions along the way. He also launched and ran several of his own businesses. But despite the suits, titles, and business cards, something always felt off. Deep down, he missed the garage, the real raw feeling of bringing old metal back to life. By 2018, he found himself standing at a crossroads. On paper, everything looked perfect. Steady income, job security, the works. But it just wasn't feeding the fire. Around that time, he'd become a huge fan of Motor Trend's Roadkill, a show all about wrenching on beat-up cars and turning them into something drivable. That's when the light bulb went off. Derek realized he'd been doing that exact same thing his whole life. So that very weekend, with a broken iPhone taped to his garage door, he filmed himself installing an engine, a transmission, and the front clip on a 1969 Chevy Camaro. No fancy equipment, no big production, just raw passion on camera. And that was the unofficial launch of what would become Vice Grip Garage. Not long after, he left the office life behind completely. The suits were retired, replaced by grease-stained coveralls. That same year, Vice Grip Garage officially became an LLC. The mission? Simple. Find old, forgotten cars, ones rotting in fields, barns, or junkyards, and try to get them running again using the bare minimum of tools. Derek's approach was something different, refreshingly real. His videos were never about showroom perfection. They were about the journey. Each one told a story, not just of busted bolts and dead batteries, but of forgotten vehicles getting a shot at redemption. One of the most beloved stories on his channel is the revival of a battered old '72 Chevelle, now known as Independence. This wasn't just any restoration project, it was Derek's personal favorite, and easily one of his biggest challenges. The car was in terrible shape, rusted out, floors caved in, panels mangled. Honestly, most people would have sent it straight to the scrapyard, but Derek saw something more. The car, with its patriotic red, white, and blue paint, felt like a metaphor, worn down, but not out, just like the country it came from. In an interview with Drive Tribe, Derek explained how the Chevelle's battle-worn look reminded him of the resilience of everyday Americans. That emotional connection fueled the rebuild. Piece by piece, he poured his energy into bringing it back. And when that engine finally fired up, it didn't just run, it roared, full of character and pride. It became a fan favorite for good reason. Independence wasn't just a car, it became a symbol of never giving up. Vice Grip Garage runs on pure storytelling fuel. Derek doesn't just wrench on cars, he hunts them down in the forgotten corners of America. We're talking barns, overgrown tree lines, old sheds, anywhere a rusted-out gem might be hiding. Every rescue feels like a mix between a treasure hunt and a mechanical Hail Mary. And that unpredictability? It's part of the magic. You never really know what he's going to drag home next. What makes it even more compelling is Derek's background. He didn't climb up through the traditional mechanic ranks. No technical school, no ASE certifications, just real-world grit, a sharp mind, and a ton of persistence. That's what makes him so relatable. He's not trying to be perfect. He's just figuring it out as he goes. His trial-and-error approach reminds viewers that it's okay to mess up, as long as you keep moving forward. Over time, Derek built more than just a following. He built trust. He didn't just show off his skills as a builder. He showed the real, unfiltered process, the busted knuckles, the moments of doubt, the small victories that add up. And that kind of honesty struck a chord. It earned him respect across the car community, turning him into more than just a YouTuber. He became a voice for gearheads who loved the grind as much as the finish. But Vice Grip Garage isn't just Derek's story. It's a full-on family affair. His wife, Jessica, plays a major role behind the scenes and in front of the camera, jumping into projects and helping shape the channel's direction. And their kids? They're part of the action too, especially little Bentley. He's already turning wrenches on go-karts and dirt bikes with his own spin-off, Little Grip Garage. With Dad by his side, he's picking up the tools and the values that built the brand from the ground up. For a long time, the Bieri family called Minnesota home. It's where they built their life, raised their kids, and ran the garage. But in late 2021, everything changed. The Bieris made a bold decision. They packed up their entire life and moved to Tennessee. This wasn't just about swapping out one address for another, it was about reshaping their future, both personally and professionally. Derek explained that the cost of living in Tennessee, compared to Minnesota, was drastically lower, so much so that it felt like night and day. Once they added up the mortgage, rent, utilities, taxes, and insurance, the savings were undeniable. Tennessee's lack of income tax was the cherry on top. Back when Derek was first building his YouTube channel, he was investing a lot of time and money without seeing much return. But this move helped him stretch every dollar further and highlighted how much of a financial game-changer the relocation had been. Another issue they faced up north was the lack of major car events. Living close to the Canadian border meant they were far from the action. Sure, there were smaller local shows here and there, but most of the big ones, especially the ones Derek wanted to attend, were in places like Florida. From Minnesota, that meant a 3-day drive. For a 1-day show, he'd lose a full week. But now that they're in Tennessee, that same drive only takes a day. That alone has saved them loads in hotel stays, meals, and fuel. And more importantly, it's allowed Derek to be more present at those big events his fans love seeing him at. Jessica, Derek's wife, also shared a glimpse into what life used to look like. Derek would spend over an hour just driving one way between his shops. Over the course of a year, that added up to about a month spent on the road, just commuting. Derek was working 7 days a week, barely seeing his family, and it started to take a toll. He knew something had to change. Now, with their new setup, things look a lot different. Derek finally has time to enjoy Friday night movie and pizza nights with his wife and sons, moments that used to be rare. Jessica said that one of the biggest reasons behind the move was the kind of childhood they both wanted for their boys. They'd both grown up in rural settings, and they wanted that same freedom and open-air adventure for their kids. In Minnesota, even riding a snowmobile on their own land could lead to someone calling the police. In Tennessee, that kind of thing is part of everyday life. Being able to use their property without restrictions meant a lot to them. And then there was the weather. Cold Minnesota winters weren't just inconvenient. They were a roadblock. For someone like Derek, who films almost everything outdoors and spends a lot of time under cars, harsh winters meant months without being able to create. In Tennessee, with its milder climate, Derek can film content nearly year-round. That means more projects, more videos, and more time doing what he loves. In the end, the move wasn't just about logistics, it was about lifestyle. The Bieri family found a place where they could grow, not just as content creators, but as a tight-knit family. Most importantly, it gave Derek the space to keep doing what he does best, making people smile through his videos, pump, and a wire-brushed underside with a coat of chassis paint for protection. With the essentials checked, it was time to see if the engine would run. He replaced the fluids, checked the ignition, and sure enough, the engine fired right up. It wasn't perfect, it ran a little rough, but considering how long it had been asleep, it was a miracle. The gearbox checked out too, though he later had to replace a few leaky fuel lines and added fuel additives to clean out the system. The biggest issue, the brake system, was toast, completely gone. Original parts were impossible to find, so Derek built custom brake lines himself. He also replaced the rotors, calipers, pads, wheel bearings, seals, and rear brake components. Even after that, a few new lines started leaking and needed a second round of fixes. Once the brakes were solid, the T-Type finally drove out under its own power, the first time in 22 years. Riding on new 235/60/15 Cooper Cobras, the Regal looked meaner and wider than ever. The journey back to Tennessee, though, wasn't without its challenges. First came the air conditioning. It was sweltering, but the refill can wouldn't fit the old system. A quick trip to the hardware store for an adapter solved that. Then came a leaking drive shaft seal. If he hadn't caught it in time, it could have drained the gearbox completely. Derek tackled the repair in a parking lot using jack stands he just bought. Once the seal was replaced, the leak stopped, and the Regal made the rest of the trip without a hitch. As for what happens once the cameras stop rolling, well, it depends. Derek holds onto some cars, especially the ones with sentimental value or a story that sticks with him. The rest, he sells them off to keep the channel going and fund the next rescue. Vice Grip Garage is always moving forward, and at the center of it all is Derek's steady vision. From day one, he's been clear. His passion is in budget builds. He's not a high-end mechanic with deep pockets. He's a hard-working, blue-collar guy, grinding 7 days a week to show that loving cars doesn't have to break the bank. For Derek, it's never been about flash. It's about getting old cars running, hitting the road, and having a good time. No matter how rough around the edges the ride might be. That mindset shows in the way he treats every build. For Derek, saving one vehicle a week is already a win, but he knows bringing them back to life is only part of the mission. To truly save a car, it has to be used. That's why some of the classics he revives, like the Monte Carlo and the Chevelle, sometimes end up in someone else's hands. He's not just fixing cars for the sake of it, he's making sure they live on. From day one, he's acknowledged that none of this would be possible without the support of his fans. Vice Grip Garage is, in many ways, a community effort. Derek's always tried to use that platform not just to entertain, but to inspire, whether it's through showing gratitude, encouraging kindness, or sparking interest in younger car lovers. He sees this channel as more than just content. It's a way to give back. Through it all, Derek Bieri has kept proving one thing over and over again. You don't need a fancy shop or deep pockets to bring forgotten classics back to life. Across backyards, barns, and fields, there are still scores of abandoned machines waiting for someone like Derek to help them find the road again. And if there's anyone who knows how to do just that, it's him. And sharing that spark of joy that comes from turning the key on something once thought dead. That same passion eventually opened the door to something even bigger: roadworthy rescues on Motor Trend. This wasn't your typical car show. It felt more like a real-life road trip with heart, grit, and a few busted bolts along the way. It officially premiered on September 28, 2022, and quickly caught fire across multiple platforms, giving fans even more of what they love: honest builds, good storytelling, and Derek doing what he does best. The show followed Derek, often joined by his wife Jessica and their 3 boys, as they crisscrossed the United States and even made their way into Canada on a mission to revive forgotten vehicles. These weren't showroom cars. Most had been sitting for years in fields or barns, and the challenge was always the same: get them running and drive them all the way back home. With basic tools, a few zip ties, bungee cords, and a lot of creativity, each rescue felt like a gamble and an adventure. But despite the love fans had for roadworthy rescues, the show was eventually cancelled. It wasn't alone either. Popular titles like Roadkill, Phantom Works, Hot Rod Garage, and Full Custom Garage were all shut down around the same time. These were all Motor Trend Studios productions, and the wave of cancellations seemed to follow a major shakeup in leadership after Motor Trend was absorbed into Warner Bros. Discovery. Since then, there's been a lot of uncertainty about whether these shows will be picked up elsewhere, on TV, or even online platforms like YouTube. As for Derek, the cancellation didn't feel like a major detour. Sure, roadworthy rescues helped introduce his work to a broader audience, but his real home, the heart of his success, has always been YouTube. Vice Grip Garage has featured some incredible barn finds over the years, and Derek's got a real talent for bringing these forgotten machines back to life. Some of them get flipped for a quick buck, others earn a permanent spot in his collection. Take the Cadillac DeVille, for example. That car sat untouched for over 20 years, completely abandoned. But that didn't stop Derek. He rolled up, saw potential in the old beast, and made it run again. The video became a fan favorite, racking up over 3.5 million views. Then came the Ford Gran Torino Elite, a real head-turner that hadn't run in nearly 3 decades. For most people, that would have been a hard pass, but for Derek, it was the perfect canvas. With some hard work and know-how, he brought the car roaring back to life, capturing every step of the transformation. Fast forward to an episode from 2023. In this one, a sun-baked 1973 Plymouth Duster was resting quietly in the grass until Derek came along. His plan was bold: turn this classic coupe into a hot rod. The car's original engine, a Chrysler Slant 6, only put out around 145 horsepower, not nearly enough for what he had in mind. That meant one thing: engine swap. The Slant 6, named for the way it sat at a 30-degree angle in the engine bay, was known for being nearly indestructible. But for this build, Derek had something much wilder in mind. He dropped in a completely custom V8, what he called a Frankenstein engine. Built on a 5.2-liter Chrysler block, it was upgraded with standard pistons, Dodge Viper rods, and topped off with unbranded heads featuring Chevrolet valve trains. In the end, this unique mix-and-match creation pumped out a staggering 485 horsepower. Before installing the new engine, Derek gave the Duster a thorough inspection. The body was surprisingly solid, aside from a bit of rust and some interior wear. Nothing too scary. After a few comical moments getting the old engine out, the new one slid into place and completely changed the car's personality. Of course, not every car he rescues is a pile of rust. Sometimes he stumbles upon something that just needs a little elbow grease to shine again, like the 1987 Buick Regal T-Type. Unlike its famous siblings, the Grand National and GNX, the T-Type flew under the radar, but it shared the same heart, a 3.8-liter turbocharged V6 engine. It may have been a bit tamer, with 200 horsepower, but thanks to a sportier suspension, it was still a quick and agile machine, a true sleeper. Derek found this particular T-Type up in northern Michigan. It had been tucked away in a storage unit since December 2000. The owner passed away not long after parking it, and the car was forgotten for over 2 decades. It wasn't until the widow realized she'd been paying for that unit all these years that the car finally saw the light of day again. Derek bought the whole unit, Regal and all, and took on the challenge of getting it roadworthy enough to drive 750 miles back to Tennessee. The car was in rough shape, covered in dust and rust, especially around the door sills. But once it landed at his buddy's place, things started looking up. The red interior, almost flawless. Service records showed it only had 2 owners and had never left Michigan. After installing a new battery and giving it a proper wash, Derek got to work. New tires, a fresh fuel tank and